Jasmine Carter woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, just like she did every day. The sun had not come up yet, but she was already dressed and ready to go to work. She put on her old blue work shirt that had oil stains from years of fixing cars. The shirt was faded, but it was her favorite because it fit her like a second skin. Jasmine grabbed her toolbox from the corner of her small apartment and headed out to Beverly Hills Motor Works, where she had worked for the past 8 years. The garage was still quiet when she arrived. The smell of motor oil and gasoline filled the air. Jasmine loved this smell because it meant she was doing what she did best. She turned on the lights and looked at the cars lined up waiting to be fixed. There were 3 Mercedes cars, 1 old BMW, and 1 truck that needed new brakes. She walked over to the first car and started checking the engine. Her hands moved quickly and carefully. She knew exactly what to look for. At around 9 o'clock in the morning, a shiny black Ferrari pulled up to the garage. Everyone stopped what they were doing to look. The car was beautiful and expensive, worth more money than most people made in their entire lives. Jasmine glanced up from her work and watched as the car parked right in front of the building. A tall man in an expensive suit stepped out. His name was Richard Sterling, and he was a billionaire CEO of a big technology company. He walked into the garage like he owned the place. Richard Sterling looked around the garage with a mean expression on his face. He saw the dirty floors, the old tools scattered around, and the workers with grease on their hands. His nose wrinkled up like he smelled something bad. He walked over to talk to Mike, who was the manager of the garage. Richard told Mike that his Ferrari was making a strange noise and that he needed it fixed right away. He said he had important meetings to attend and that the car had to be ready by tomorrow morning. Mike nodded and said he would take care of it. Richard handed over the keys without even looking at the mechanics. Jasmine was listening to this whole conversation while she worked on the Mercedes. She had a special gift. She could listen to the sound of a car engine and know exactly what was wrong with it. It was like the car was talking to her. She understood the language of machines better than most people understood the language of words. When Mike assigned the Ferrari to one of the younger mechanics named Tom, Jasmine walked over quietly and said, "Let me listen to that car first." Richard Sterling was still standing nearby, and he saw Jasmine walking toward his Ferrari. His face turned angry. He shouted at her, "Hey you, what are you doing? Don't you dare touch my car with your dirty hands." Jasmine stopped, but she did not look scared. She looked calm and peaceful. Richard continued yelling, "You look like you fix old cars on the street, not high-class Ferraris. I don't know how you people even got jobs here, but I want a real mechanic working on my car, not some street worker." The garage went quiet. Everyone was embarrassed for Jasmine. Some of the other workers looked down at the ground, but Jasmine did not cry. She did not get angry, she just nodded slowly. Richard walked away feeling proud of himself. He had made himself feel big by putting someone else down. But Jasmine was different from other people. She did not let mean words stop her from doing her job. She was confident in her skills because she had spent thousands of hours learning how to fix cars. She had read books about engines. She had watched videos and studied diagrams. She had taken her car apart and put it back together. She had fixed cars in the rain and in the dark. She had worked when she was tired and when she was sick. Her knowledge and experience were real. They could not be taken away by mean words. Later that morning, when Richard had gone to his meeting, Mike asked Jasmine to listen to the Ferrari. She walked around the car and listened carefully to the engine. Her eyes closed. Her mind worked like a computer, analyzing every sound. She heard something that other people could not hear. There was a problem with the hybrid calibration. The electric motors were not talking to the gas engine the right way. She explained this to Mike with simple words. Tom and the other mechanics were shocked. They had not heard that problem. Jasmine knew immediately what was wrong and how to fix it. This was just the beginning of a very interesting day. Nobody knew yet that Jasmine's talent and knowledge would soon change everything for her and for Richard Sterling. After the lunch break, Mike called Jasmine into his office. He had a worried look on his face. He told her that Richard Sterling had called back and said that Tom, the young mechanic, had been working on the Ferrari for 4 hours, but could not find the problem. The car was making strange noises and something was definitely wrong, but nobody could figure out what it was. Mike said that Richard was angry and wanted a meeting with the best mechanic in the garage. He looked at Jasmine and said, "Can you go talk to him?" Jasmine nodded and walked out. When Jasmine walked into the garage, she saw Richard standing with his arms crossed over his chest. He was pacing back and forth like a tiger in a cage. Tom was standing by the Ferrari, looking confused and ashamed. The car's hood was open, and there were tools scattered everywhere. Richard saw Jasmine and immediately started complaining. He said the garage was incompetent and that he was considering taking his car to a different place. He complained about the quality of work and the waste of his time. Jasmine listened without saying anything. Then Jasmine asked a simple question. "Can I listen to the engine?" Richard rolled his eyes and said, "Of course, go ahead, but I doubt you will find anything different." Jasmine walked over to the Ferrari and closed her eyes. She put her ear close to the engine and listened very carefully. She was trying to understand what the machine was trying to tell her. Most people just look at a car, but Jasmine listened to it. She heard vibrations and frequencies that told stories. She heard patterns in the sound that were wrong. After about 2 minutes, she opened her eyes and spoke. "Your problem is not a simple one," Jasmine said in a calm voice. "The hybrid system and the gas engine are not working together correctly. The electric motors and the fuel engine are supposed to talk to each other in a perfect rhythm, like a dance, but right now they are out of sync. The pressure control valves are oscillating outside of their optimal frequency. This means they are moving up and down at the wrong speed." Richard looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language. He said, "What are you talking about? Pressure control valves, oscillating frequency. Are you making this up?" Jasmine did not get angry or upset. She simply explained it in a different way. "Think of it like this," she said. "Imagine you have two people clapping their hands. They need to clap at the same speed and at the same time. If one person claps fast and the other claps slow, the rhythm is broken, the harmony is gone right now. Your Ferrari's engine is like those two people clapping at different speeds. The turbo is spinning one way, and the fuel injectors are firing another way. They are not in harmony." Richard was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "And you can fix this?" Jasmine nodded. "Yes, but I need to do a few things first. I need to run special diagnostic equipment that listens to all the engine's sounds. This equipment will record what the engine is telling us. Then I need to analyze that information and find the exact frequency where the problem is happening. Once I know that, I can recalibrate the hybrid controller. The controller is like the brain of the hybrid system. It makes decisions about when to use the electric motor and when to use the gas engine. When the brain has the wrong information, the body does not work right." Tom spoke up and said, "We tried using the factory diagnostic equipment, but it did not show any problems," Jasmine explained. "The factory equipment is good for finding broken parts and obvious problems. But this problem is more sophisticated. It is about the timing and the frequency. You need equipment that listens to the sounds and measures the vibrations." "Not all garages have this kind of equipment," Richard asked. "How long will this take?" Jasmine thought for a moment and said, "I need to keep the car overnight. I need to run full tests and then make the adjustments. If everything goes well, the car will be ready by tomorrow morning. But Richard, I need you to understand something important. This is not just about fixing your car for today. If I do not fix this correctly, the engine block itself could start failing. The stress and pressure would continue to damage the internal parts. In a few weeks, you would have a much bigger problem, and the repair would cost 10 times more money." Richard's face turned pale. He had not thought about that possibility, he asked. "Are you sure about this?" Jasmine said. "I am sure that this is the problem, and I am sure I can fix it. But I cannot promise anything 100% until I work on it. However, my experience tells me that this diagnosis is correct," Mike said. "Mr. Sterling, Jasmine is our best mechanic. If she says she can fix it, then she can fix it. I trust her completely." Richard looked at Jasmine for a long moment. Then he said, "Okay, fine, do it, but if you make this car worse, there will be problems," Jasmine said. "I understand." She took the keys and drove the Ferrari into the repair bay. She was ready to work through the night if she had to. She had something to prove, not just to Richard Sterling, but to everyone who had ever doubted her. The night was long and quiet at Beverly Hills Motor Works. Jasmine had driven the Ferrari into the most secure garage bay, the one with the best lighting and the most advanced equipment. She parked it carefully and turned off the engine. The garage was closed now and only Jasmine was there, working alone under the bright fluorescent lights. Mike had given her permission to stay as late as she needed, Jasmine opened her special toolbox, the one she had kept since her days working with McLaren Racing. This was not just any toolbox. It contained diagnostic equipment worth thousands of dollars. Equipment that could listen to engines in ways that normal tools could not. She had brought home this box because she had learned many years ago that real knowledge required real investment. She had spent her own money to buy these tools because she believed in herself. She connected the Ferrari to her advanced diagnostic system. This was not the simple equipment that most garages used. This was professional racing equipment, the kind used by Formula One teams. The machine had microphones that could capture sounds at frequencies that human ears could not even hear. It had sensors that measured vibrations thousands of times per second. The data started flowing into the computer screen, thousands of lines of information, numbers and graphs and patterns. Jasmine sat down and studied the data with complete focus. Her eyes moved across the screen, analyzing everything. She had studied mechanical engineering at MIT, one of the best universities in America. She had worked for 3 years with McLaren Racing, fixing the hybrid synchronization systems in their fastest cars. She knew how these systems worked better than most engineers in the world. But she never told anyone this. She had kept it quiet because she wanted people to respect her for her work, not for her credentials. The data told her story. The turbocharger and the fuel injection system were out of harmony. They were supposed to work together like dancers in a perfect choreography. When the turbo spun fast, the fuel injectors should fire at exactly the right moment. But in this Ferrari, they were not synchronized. The turbo would spin too fast and then the fuel would come in too slow. This created a harmonic resonance issue. The two systems were fighting each other instead of helping each other. Jasmine knew that if Richard kept driving this car, the problem would get worse and worse. The friction between the systems would damage the internal engine parts. Small cracks would form in the metal, then bigger cracks eventually. The entire engine block would fail, the engine would seize up, and the car would be worth nothing but scrap metal. She had to fix this correctly, and she had to do it tonight. She opened the Ferrari's engine compartment wide. She began to trace the wiring and the pipes and the sensors. Every part had a purpose, every connection mattered. She found the hybrid controller, the computer brain that managed the entire hybrid system. This was the key to everything. She disconnected it carefully and opened it up on her workbench. Inside were circuit boards and microchips, tiny components that controlled millions of calculations every second. Using her specialized equipment, Jasmine began to reprogram the hybrid controller. She connected it to her laptop computer. She had the factory software files stored on her hard drive, the official Ferrari documentation and specifications. She knew the exact frequencies where the problem was happening, and she knew how to fix it. She adjusted the timing algorithms, changed the fuel injection delay parameters, modified the turbo boost curves. Each change was small, but each one was important. She was like a surgeon performing a delicate operation. One wrong move could make things worse, but Jasmine had done this many times before. Not with Ferraris, but with McLaren Racing hybrids, which were just as complicated, maybe even more complicated. She worked with perfect precision, her hands steady, her mind clear. The hours passed slowly. It was now 2 o'clock in the morning. Jasmine had been working for 7 hours. Her neck was stiff and her eyes were tired, but she was focused on the work. She made one final adjustment to the hybrid controller parameters. She uploaded the corrected software back into the device. She sealed it up carefully and reinstalled it into the Ferrari. Then came the test. Jasmine started the Ferrari's engine. She listened carefully. The sound was different now. The vibrations were smooth, the harmony was returning. She revved the engine gently and it responded perfectly. The turbo and the fuel injection were now working together, synchronized like a perfect orchestra. The engine sang, there was no other way to describe it. It was beautiful. She drove the car around the garage, testing the acceleration, testing the braking, testing the handling. Everything was working perfectly, better than before. The car was responsive and smooth. The engine ran with no strain or struggle. She smiled, knowing that she had done it. She had solved the impossible problem. Jasmine parked the Ferrari back in its spot. She cleaned up all her tools. She put everything back in her toolbox. She was covered in sweat and dirt. Her clothes were stained with oil, but she did not care. She had fixed the car. She had proven that she had the knowledge and the skill to do what Richard Sterling thought was impossible. At 5 o'clock in the morning, Jasmine sat down on a bench in the garage. She was exhausted but satisfied. She had worked through the entire night, and the job was done. She pulled out her phone and texted Mike. "The Ferrari is ready. Tell Mr. Sterling that his car is fixed, and it runs better than new." Then she closed her eyes for a moment, waiting for the sun to come up, knowing that today everything was going to change. The sun rose slowly over Beverly Hills, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. Jasmine was still in the garage, but now she was sitting on a chair drinking coffee. She had not slept all night, but she felt alive and energized. She knew that something important was about to happen. Around 7 o'clock in the morning, Mike arrived at the garage. He saw Jasmine and asked, "How did it go?" Jasmine smiled and said, "The car is perfect. Start it up and listen." Mike walked over to the Ferrari and turned the key. The engine started smoothly. Without any strange sounds, he revved it gently, and the sound was clean and powerful. Mike's eyes widened. He had worked with cars for 30 years, and he could tell that something remarkable had happened. He said, "Jasmine, this is incredible. This car sounds like it just came from the factory, but better than that. It sounds like it has been tuned by a professional racer." Jasmine just smiled and said, "It just needed someone who understood it." At 8 o'clock in the morning, Richard Sterling arrived at the garage. He was angry. He had called earlier and demanded to know what was happening with his car. He walked in with his personal assistant following behind him. Taking notes, he was dressed in an expensive suit, and he looked impatient. Mike greeted him and said, "Your car is ready, Mr. Sterling. Please come and see." They walked over to the Ferrari together. Jasmine stood nearby cleaning her tools. Richard did not even look at her. He was focused entirely on his car, Mike said. "Why don't you start it and take it for a test drive?" Richard got into the driver's seat and started the engine. The sound that came out was smooth and powerful, not like the rough, struggling sound from yesterday. His face changed immediately. He could feel the difference. He could hear the quality in the engine's voice. Richard drove the Ferrari around the block. He accelerated smoothly, and the car responded perfectly. He braked gently, and the brakes worked like silk. He turned the corner, and the handling was precise and responsive. When he came back to the garage, his face was completely different from before. The anger was gone, replaced by shock and confusion. He got out of the car and looked at it like he was seeing it for the first time. He looked at Mike and asked, "What did you do?" Mike pointed to Jasmine and said, "She fixed it." Richard turned and looked at Jasmine for the first time that morning. His eyes studied her carefully, as if he was seeing a different person than the one he had yelled at yesterday. Jasmine was wiping her hands on a rag. She looked calm and peaceful, like she had done nothing special. Richard walked over to Jasmine and asked, "How did you fix it?" Jasmine explained in simple words. The hybrid system was not working in harmony. The turbocharger and the fuel injection were fighting each other instead of working together. I recalibrated the hybrid controller so that both systems work at exactly the right time. "Now they are synchronized perfectly," Richard asked. "Did you take the engine apart?" Jasmine said. "No, I did not need to. The problem was not in the parts themselves. The problem was in how the parts were communicating with each other. It was like two people who need to talk to each other but were speaking different languages. Once I taught them how to speak the same language, everything worked." "How did you know how to do this?" Richard asked. Jasmine said, "I studied the problem carefully. I listened to what the engine was telling me, and I had the right knowledge and experience to understand what needed to be fixed." She did not mention MIT or McLaren Racing or any of her credentials. She let her work speak for itself. Richard was quiet for a long time. He was realizing something important. Yesterday he had judged Jasmine by her appearance and her clothes in the garage where she worked. He had assumed she was just a street mechanic with no real knowledge or skill. But now he could see that he had been completely wrong. He had been ignorant and arrogant. This woman had knowledge that most engineers in the world did not have. She had solved a problem that nobody else could solve. He said, "I owe you an apology. Yesterday I was disrespectful to you. I judged you without knowing anything about you. I assumed that because you worked at this garage that you did not have real skills. I was wrong, I can see that now." Jasmine nodded and said, "Thank you for saying that, but honestly, what matters is that your car is fixed and now it runs beautifully," Richard said. "More than that has happened here. You have shown me something important. You have shown me that my assumptions about people are often wrong. You have shown me that real knowledge and real skill cannot be hidden by dirty clothes or a small garage. They shine through no matter what. Mike was standing nearby, and he said to Richard, "Jasmine has been our best mechanic here for 8 years. She can fix almost anything. She has never complained about hard work. She is honest and reliable. She is the kind of person that every company needs." Richard looked at Jasmine with new respect and admiration. He said, "I believe it, I can see it now." The conversation continued for another 30 minutes. Richard asked Jasmine many questions about how she had learned her skills and what her dreams were for the future. Jasmine answered honestly. She told him about her passion for cars and her love of solving complex problems. She told him about her dream to one day have her own garage where she could help other people learn about mechanics. Richard listened carefully when Richard left the garage that morning. Everything was different. He had come in angry and dismissive, but he was leaving with respect and admiration. He had learned an important lesson about not judging people by their appearance. Jasmine had not just fixed his car, she had fixed something inside him. She had opened his eyes to his own blindness and ignorance. 2 days after Jasmine fixed Richard Sterling's Ferrari, something unexpected happened. Richard was driving the car on the highway when he received a phone call. It was from Ferrari's main office in Maranello, Italy. The man on the phone introduced himself as Marco Rossi, the chief technology officer of Ferrari. He said that he had received a report about the Ferrari that Richard owned. He said that the car's hybrid system was performing at levels that were beyond the factory specifications. Richard was surprised. He asked Marco how he knew about the repairs. Marco explained that all Ferrari cars have a tracking system. When a car runs better than expected, the system automatically alerts the Ferrari engineers. The car had been sending data continuously, and the engineers in Italy had noticed that this particular Ferrari was performing like a racing car, not like a regular luxury car. The efficiency was higher, the power output was greater, and the hybrid synchronization was perfect. Marco asked Richard who had performed the repairs. Richard hesitated for a moment, then he told him the truth. He said that a mechanic named Jasmine Carter at a small garage in Beverly Hills had fixed the car. He explained that Richard had originally thought she was just an ordinary mechanic, but that she had turned out to be incredibly skilled. Marco was quiet on the phone for a moment. Then he said something that changed everything. He said, "Mr. Sterling, we would like to meet this mechanic. We would like to understand how she solved a problem that our own engineers have been trying to fix for 6 months." Richard was shocked. He said, "Are you serious?" Marco said. "Completely serious. The hybrid synchronization issue in this model has been a known problem. Our engineers have been working on it, but they have not been able to find a solution yet. If this mechanic in Beverly Hills has solved it, we need to know how she did it. We need to learn from her." Richard said he would arrange a meeting and hung up. Richard immediately drove to Beverly Hills Motor Works. He found Jasmine working on a Lexus, helping a customer with some maintenance issues. He asked Mike if he could talk to Jasmine privately. They went into Mike's office, and Richard closed the door. He said, "Jasmine, I just received a very interesting phone call. It was from Ferrari, in Italy. They want to meet you." Jasmine looked confused. She said, "Ferrari? What do you mean they want to meet me?" Richard explained what Marco had told him. He said that Ferrari's engineers had noticed that his car was performing beyond their specifications. They wanted to understand how Jasmine had fixed the hybrid synchronization problem. Jasmine's eyes widened. She said, "They are offering me a job," Richard said. "I don't know, but I think they want to learn from you. They want to understand your methods." 3 weeks later, Jasmine was on an airplane to Italy. Ferrari had invited her to their headquarters in Maranello. This was a small factory town, but it was famous around the world because it was where the best racing cars were built. Jasmine had studied Ferrari cars her entire career. She had read about their history, she had watched videos of their races, but she had never imagined that she would actually go there and meet the engineers. When she arrived at Ferrari's headquarters, she was greeted by Marco Rossi and his team of engineers. They were all men, all wearing expensive suits. They looked professional and serious. Marco shook her hand and said, "Welcome to Ferrari. We are very excited to meet you, please. Tell us how you fixed the hybrid synchronization problem." Jasmine sat down in a conference room with 12 Ferrari engineers. She had brought her laptop computer with her. She connected it to their presentation screen. She showed them all the diagnostic data that she had collected from Richard Sterling's Ferrari. She explained step by step what she had done. She showed them the exact frequencies where the problem had occurred. She showed them the calculations she had made to recalibrate the hybrid controller. The engineers asked many questions. They wanted to know about her education, her experience, her methods. Jasmine answered all their questions honestly. She told them about her time at MIT, her work with McLaren Racing, her passion for solving complex mechanical problems. The engineers listened carefully, and their respect for her grew with every word. Then something important happened. One of the senior engineers, named Dr. Alessandro Ferraro, said, "Miss Carter, what you have done is remarkable. You have solved a problem that our best engineers could not solve. This is not just about fixing one car. This is about improving the entire hybrid system for all Ferrari cars. Your solution could be applied to hundreds of cars. You could help millions of people have better cars," Marco said. "We would like to make you an offer. We would like you to join Ferrari as a senior hybrid systems engineer. You would work with our team to develop and improve our hybrid technology. You would help us create the best hybrid systems in the world. What do you think?" Jasmine felt tears come to her eyes. She had worked so hard for so many years. She had been disrespected and underestimated so many times. She had worked in a small garage in Beverly Hills while possessing knowledge that few people in the world had. And now, finally, her talent was being recognized. Not just by one person, but by one of the most prestigious car companies in the world. She said yes. That night, Ferrari announced on their official website that they had hired a new senior hybrid systems engineer named Jasmine Carter. The announcement said that Jasmine had developed a revolutionary solution to the hybrid synchronization problem, and that she would lead Ferrari's new hybrid innovation department. News organizations around the world started reporting the story. A black woman from Beverly Hills, working at a small garage, had been discovered by Ferrari. She had solved a problem that the company's best engineers could not solve. The story spread on social media, on television news, on websites. People who had never thought about cars started reading about Jasmine Carter's incredible achievement. Richard Sterling saw the news. He smiled and thought about how he had almost destroyed this person with his arrogance and disrespect. Instead, he had accidentally helped change her life. He sent Jasmine a message saying, "Congratulations, I always knew you were special, even when I was too blind to see it." The news about Jasmine Carter spread like wildfire across the internet and television. Within 1 week, her story was being told on major news channels around the world. CNN, BBC, and other international media outlets all wanted to interview her. They wanted to know her story. They wanted to understand how a black woman working in a small Beverly Hills garage had managed to solve a problem that Ferrari's top engineers could not solve. Jasmine was not comfortable with all this attention. She had always preferred to work quietly, letting her skills speak for themselves. But Ferrari insisted that she do the interviews. They said that her story was important. It showed the world that talent and knowledge could come from anywhere, that prejudice and discrimination were wrong, that people should be judged by their abilities, not by their appearance or their background. The first major interview was with CNN. A famous news anchor named Anderson Cooper wanted to talk to Jasmine. The interview was scheduled for a Friday evening. Jasmine wore a simple black dress. She did not try to look fancy or different from who she was. She sat down across from Anderson, and the camera started rolling. Anderson asked her to tell her story from the beginning. Jasmine spoke about growing up in a poor neighborhood in Los Angeles. She talked about how her father had been a mechanic. He had taught her about cars when she was just a small child. He had shown her how engines worked, how to use tools, how to solve problems. Her father had passed away when she was 16 years old, but his love for mechanics had stayed with her. She talked about how she had struggled to get people to take her seriously, how she had applied to colleges and been rejected, how she had applied to jobs and been turned away because she was a woman, because she was black, because people did not believe she could do the work. She talked about working at Beverly Hills Motor Works for 8 years, doing excellent work but never being recognized or rewarded. She talked about how she had put herself through MIT by working nights and taking classes during the day. Anderson asked her about the moment when Richard Sterling had yelled at her for touching his Ferrari. Jasmine described that moment calmly. She said that she had felt anger and hurt, but that she had decided not to let his words stop her from doing her job. She said that she had proven her abilities not with words but with her work. Anderson asked her, "Did you ever think that this one moment, this one day, would change your entire life?" Jasmine said. "No, I never thought about it that way. I just thought about fixing the car. I thought about understanding the problem and solving it. I did not think about how it would affect my life. I only thought about the work that needed to be done." Anderson nodded and said, "That's remarkable. You focused on excellence. And excellence opened doors for you." The interview was broadcast on CNN that evening, and it was watched by millions of people around the world. Social media exploded with comments and reactions. People were moved by Jasmine's story. They shared it with their friends and family. They talked about how her story showed the importance of hard work and persistence. They talked about how racism and discrimination were real problems, but how they could be overcome by talent and determination. The next day, the New York Times published a long article about Jasmine. The article was titled, "From Beverly Hills Garage to Ferrari, The Extraordinary Story of Jasmine Carter." The article went into detail about her life, her struggles, her achievements. It talked about how she had educated herself, how she had overcome discrimination, how she had finally received the recognition that she deserved. The article was shared thousands of times. BBC News did an interview with her via satellite. The interview was broadcast to the United Kingdom and Europe. In that interview, Jasmine talked about how she wanted to inspire other women to pursue careers in engineering and mechanics. She said, "For a long time, I did not see other women like me in these fields. I did not see black women becoming engineers or mechanics. But now I know that we are there. We just have to keep working, keep learning, keep believing in ourselves." Magazines like Forbes and Time wanted to put her on their covers. Forbes titled their article, "The Mechanic Who Outsmarted Ferrari's Engineers." Time titled their article, "Jasmine Carter, How Talent Transcends Everything." Both articles explored her remarkable journey and her contributions to automotive engineering. Universities started calling her, asking her to speak at their engineering programs. Harvard, Stanford, and MIT all wanted her to come talk to their students. Jasmine agreed to visit several universities. She spoke to classes full of young people who wanted to become engineers. She told them her story, and she saw hope and determination in their eyes. She saw young women of color who were inspired by her success, who believed that they could also achieve great things. Richard Sterling saw all of this media attention. He was proud of the role he had played in helping Jasmine get recognized. He gave an interview where he talked about his initial arrogance and how Jasmine had taught him an important lesson about respect and not judging people. He said, "Jasmine Carter is the most talented person I have ever met. I was foolish to underestimate her, but I am grateful that I had the chance to learn from her." The story also reached schools. Teachers started using Jasmine's story in their classrooms. They taught students about perseverance, about not giving up in the face of discrimination, about believing in your own abilities. Students wrote essays about Jasmine. They talked about how her story inspired them to work harder in school, to pursue their dreams. Social organizations and civil rights groups celebrated Jasmine's success. They said that her story was proof that talented people of color could break through barriers and achieve great things. They used her story to inspire others who faced discrimination and prejudice. Jasmine received countless letters and messages from people around the world. A young black girl from South Africa wrote to her saying that she wanted to become a mechanic because of Jasmine's story. A young woman from India wrote saying that she had quit engineering school because she did not believe in herself, but that Jasmine's story had convinced her to go back to school. An elderly woman from Germany wrote saying that Jasmine's determination reminded her of her own struggles many years ago. Within just 3 weeks, Jasmine Carter had gone from being an unknown mechanic to being an international inspiration. Her face was recognized everywhere. Her story was told in 50 different countries in 40 different languages. She had become more than just a person who fixed cars. She had become a symbol of hope, a symbol of the power of persistence, a symbol that talent and excellence could overcome prejudice and discrimination. While Jasmine Carter's career was rising like a rocket shooting toward the stars, Richard Sterling's career was beginning to crumble like a building in an earthquake. The board of directors at his technology company had seen the news about how he had disrespected and humiliated Jasmine. They had watched the interviews where she described the moment he had yelled at her in the garage. The board members were not happy. They believed that a CEO with such poor judgment and such discriminatory behavior was not fit to lead their company. The company's investors were also concerned. They began to worry about the company's reputation. If the CEO was willing to disrespect and judge people based on their appearance, what did that say about how he treated his employees? How did he treat women in his company? How did he treat people of color? The investors started to ask questions, and those questions were difficult for Richard to answer. 1 month after Jasmine's story became international news, the board of directors called Richard to a special meeting. He did not know what the meeting was about, but he had a feeling that something bad was coming. He walked into the conference room and saw all the board members sitting around the table. Their faces were serious and stern. The chairman of the board spoke first. He said, "Richard, we have been following the news about your treatment of Jasmine Carter. We have read the interviews, we have watched the videos. We have heard how you humiliated her in front of other workers." Richard tried to explain. He said, "That was a moment of weakness. I was wrong, but I have since apologized. I have learned from my mistake." The chairman said, "That is not enough. We have also received complaints from several female employees at our company. They have reported incidents of discrimination and disrespectful behavior. We have discovered that this is a pattern, not just a one-time mistake." The board members presented evidence of Richard's inappropriate behavior toward women and minorities in his company. There were dozens of complaints. Some employees said he had made racist comments. Other employees said he had made sexist remarks. Several employees said he had passed them over for promotions and given those promotions to less qualified white men. The evidence painted a picture of a CEO who had serious problems with prejudice and discrimination. The chairman said, "Richard, we have decided that you are no longer fit to lead this company. We are asking for your resignation, effective immediately. If you do not resign, we will fire you for cause, and we will make all of this evidence public." Richard's face turned white. He tried to argue, he tried to defend himself, but the board members would not listen. They had made their decision. Richard Sterling was forced to resign from his position as CEO. The company issued a press statement saying that Richard had resigned to pursue other interests. But everyone knew the real reason. The news media reported on his resignation and connected it to the Jasmine Carter story. News outlets around the world reported that the billionaire CEO who had disrespected Jasmine Carter had lost his job. After leaving the company, Richard tried to find another job, but no other company wanted to hire him. His reputation had been damaged beyond repair. Companies were afraid that if they hired him, they would also be criticized for supporting discrimination and prejudice. Some companies received complaints from their own employees saying that they did not want to work for a company that would hire someone like Richard Sterling. Richard tried to start his own business, but investors were not willing to give him money. Everyone knew about his past behavior. Everyone knew about how he had treated Jasmine Carter. Nobody wanted to be associated with him. He tried to buy his way back into respectability by donating money to charities. But people saw through this. They understood that he was only trying to fix his reputation, not because he was truly sorry, but because he wanted to restore his image and his wealth. 6 months after being forced to resign, Richard's personal life also began to fall apart. His wife had read all the stories about how he had treated Jasmine. She was ashamed to be married to him. She was embarrassed by his behavior. She filed for divorce. His children were also disappointed and angry with him. They saw that their father was not the man they thought he was. He was someone who judged people unfairly, someone who used his power to mistreat others. Richard's reputation continued to decline. He became known not as a successful businessman, but as the man who had disrespected Jasmine Carter. Every time someone searched his name on the internet, the first results were stories about his behavior in the garage and his subsequent downfall. He had become a symbol of arrogance and prejudice, a cautionary tale about what happens when you judge people based on their appearance. 1 year after his resignation, Richard ran into Mike at a restaurant in Beverly Hills. Mike was having lunch with some friends. Richard approached him and tried to talk, but Mike was cold and distant. He did not want to associate with Richard. Mike said, "You destroyed yourself, not Jasmine. She is thriving. She is helping thousands of people. She is changing the world. But you are falling apart. That's what happens when you are filled with arrogance and prejudice." Richard tried to defend himself one more time. He said, "I made a mistake. I was wrong. "But I have learned from it," Mike said. "Learning is not enough. Actions matter more than words. You had a chance to treat Jasmine with respect, but you chose arrogance instead. Now you are living with the consequences." Mike turned away and went back to his table. Richard was left standing alone, feeling the weight of his mistakes. He had lost his job, his marriage, his reputation, and his wealth was rapidly disappearing. He had become a prisoner in his own life, trapped by the consequences of his own actions. He watched from a distance as Jasmine thrived and succeeded. And he knew that he had created his own downfall. Sometimes success in the world is not measured only in money or power. Sometimes it is measured in character and in how we treat other people. Jasmine had shown character and the world had rewarded her. Richard had shown arrogance and the world had punished him. This was the natural law of cause and effect, action and consequence. 5 years had passed since the day Jasmine Carter fixed Richard Sterling's Ferrari. 5 years of incredible achievements and transformations. Jasmine now led Ferrari's hybrid innovation department with brilliance and success. She had developed new hybrid systems that were being used in Ferrari's newest racing cars. These cars were winning races around the world. They were winning at Formula One competitions, at Le Mans, at every major racing event. Jasmine's technology had helped Ferrari become the most successful hybrid car manufacturer in the world. She had also started her own mentorship program. She spent time teaching young people about engineering and mechanics. She worked with high schools and universities. She visited poor neighborhoods where young people had no access to engineering education. She told them that they could achieve anything if they worked hard and believed in themselves. Hundreds of young women, especially Black women and women of color, had pursued careers in engineering because of Jasmine's inspiration and guidance. Jasmine had been invited to speak at the United Nations. She had received multiple engineering awards. She had been named one of the most influential women in the world by several major magazines. She had written a book about her life and her journey. The book had become a bestseller. It had been translated into 30 languages. People all over the world had read her story and been inspired by her determination and her talent. She had also started her own garage. Beverly Hills Motor Works was now famous. People came from all over the world to bring their cars there. Not just because the work was excellent, but also because they wanted to meet Jasmine. They wanted to tell her how much her story had inspired them. They wanted to shake her hand and thank her for showing them that anything was possible. One day, Jasmine received a letter in the mail. It was from Richard Sterling. He had written a long letter explaining everything that had happened to him after he lost his job. He wrote about his divorce, his financial troubles, his damaged reputation, but he also wrote something important. He wrote that he had learned a real lesson from his mistakes, not just intellectually, but in his heart. He wrote that he had spent the last 5 years trying to rebuild his life and his character. Richard wrote that he had gone back to school and studied ethics and diversity. He wrote that he had volunteered with organizations that helped disadvantaged people. He wrote that he had tried to make amends for all the harm he had caused. He wrote that he would never forget the day that he had yelled at Jasmine in the garage. He wrote that moment had changed his entire life, not immediately but eventually. He wrote that losing everything had taught him something more valuable than any amount of money or power. Most importantly, Richard wrote a public apology. He sent copies of this apology to every major newspaper and television station. In the apology, he acknowledged his racist and discriminatory behavior. He apologized specifically to Jasmine. He apologized to all the women and minorities that he had disrespected at his company. He wrote that he had been wrong, that he had been arrogant, that he had deserved everything that had happened to him. The apology was published in newspapers around the world. Some people thought it was sincere. Other people were skeptical and thought it was just an attempt to rehabilitate his reputation. But Jasmine believed that Richard had finally learned his lesson. She believed that his suffering and his loss had changed him. She decided to give him a chance. She wrote him a letter back. In her letter, Jasmine wrote that she forgave him. She wrote that she understood that people could change and grow. She wrote that she was glad he had learned from his mistakes. She also wrote that his fall from power was not her fault or her responsibility. She wrote that he had created his own consequences through his own actions. She wrote that she bore him no ill will, but that she could not forget what he had done. They decided to meet in person. They met at Beverly Hills Motor Works, in the same garage where everything had started 5 years earlier. Richard walked in and saw Jasmine working on a car. Just like she had been on that day long ago, he walked over to her and she looked up. They did not shake hands or hug. They simply looked at each other. And there was understanding between them, Richard said. I have thought about that day 1,000 times. I have replayed my words over and over in my mind. I can hear myself yelling at you. I can see the hurt in your eyes. I wish I could take back those words. I wish I could go back in time and treat you with the respect that you deserved, Jasmine said. You taught me an important lesson without meaning to. You taught me that I did not need anyone's approval or respect. I only needed to believe in myself and do excellent work. Your disrespect hurt me that day, but it also motivated me. It made me determined to prove that I was better than you thought I was. They talked for a long time. They talked about mistakes and redemption, about prejudice and learning, about how people can grow and change. By the end of the conversation, Richard had tears in his eyes. He finally understood the damage that his arrogance had caused. He finally understood that people were people, regardless of their appearance or their background. He finally understood that judging someone before knowing them was the beginning of all injustice. Jasmine had no desire to hurt Richard or to see him suffer. She had moved past that anger. She had transformed it into motivation and achievement. She had used his disrespect as fuel to climb higher and achieve more. She had built a beautiful life for herself, not to prove something to Richard, but to prove something to herself, and in doing so, she had also inspired millions of other people around the world. The world celebrated Jasmine's victory, not as a victory over Richard Sterling, but as a victory of the human spirit, a victory of talent and determination over prejudice and discrimination, a victory of excellence over arrogance. Jasmine Carter had become more than just a mechanic. She had become a symbol of hope. She had shown the world that no matter where you come from or what obstacles you face, if you believe in yourself and work hard, you can achieve amazing things. And sometimes, the greatest victory is not in defeating your enemies, but in becoming so successful and so full of purpose that your past enemies become irrelevant to your future.